is Stephanie Spicer, and I'm a Limey. Not a doctor or a scientist, just a person with Lyme disease sharing what I've learned through experience and reading. I'd like to talk a bit today about worm-type parasites and their relation to us Limeys. Now, before you turn off this video in disgust, let's get a little bit of perspective. Parasites are a very common problem around the world. I think it would be safe to guess that most, if not all, human beings host some kind of parasite, and in many countries it's routine to take parasite medicine from time to time. But in the Western world, where we're blessed to have access to clean water, plumbing, and footwear, we tend to forget about and overlook this issue. But don't worry, I'm not going to include pictures because I have a particular dislike for worms. According to Dr. Richard Horowitz, intestinal parasites like Giardia, amoeba, pinworm, hookworm, schistosoma, and strongyloides are part of the Lyme disease and associated infections map, what he calls MSIDS. They've been found on both serum and antibody testing and stool cultures, I presume of his patients, in biofilms in the bloodstream, in the spinal fluid of multiple sclerosis and Alzheimer's patients, and in deer ticks and lone star ticks. While each of these types of parasites has its own particular pathology, they share a lot of characteristics in infection, symptoms, and treatment. Symptoms may include stomach or abdominal pain, nausea, stomach rumbling, excess gas, intestinal obstruction, diarrhea and constipation, sometimes alternating, vomiting, loss of appetite, weight loss, itching and pain in the anus and perineum, and gastrointestinal bleeding. These are all symptoms of the digestive system, and that's the region we usually associate parasites with. But did you know that strongyloids actually spend part of their life cycle in the lungs? This can cause respiratory symptoms like cough and tracheal irritation mimicking bronchitis. Parasites can also cause fever, aching, chills, gland enlargement, fatigue, irritability, emotional instability, and anemia, and can affect physical and cognitive growth in children. Like the other infections that Limeys have, worm parasites can persist for years in our systems, sometimes seemingly dormant, and may then suddenly take advantage of a compromised immune system to break out into hyperinfection, which can be dangerous enough to kill us. This dissemination can occur decades after the initial infection, and infection is lifelong unless effective treatment eliminates all parasites in all stages of their life cycle. This is one reason to keep our immune systems as healthy as possible, and to avoid suppressing them with substances such as steroids and antihistamines. Steroids can initiate parasite hyperinfection. It's also important not to simply let these organisms share our body's resources, and instead to initiate treatment as soon as possible and continue until we are clear. In this video, I'm going to discuss 3 different types of treatments: drugs, alternative medicine, and electromedicine. Let's start with drugs. Dr. Horowitz states that regimens including biltricide, ivermectin, pyrantel pamoate, also called Pinax, paromomycin, Alinea, and albenza have been effective in certain patients with not only persistent GI symptoms, but also fatigue, headaches, and myalgias resistant to classic tick-borne therapy. And some neuropsychiatric Lyme patients have seen improvement in cognition and behavior with antiparasitic drugs. However, it's important to remember that these drugs only kill the adult parasites in the gut, and not the larvae that are migrating around the body during their autoinfective cycle. That means that treatments must be repeated periodically. Some sources say every 2 weeks because that's how long the cycle is, so that eventually all the parasites can be caught during their adult stage. The optimal treatment duration for those with disseminated infections is still unclear. Brian Rosner, a longtime curator of the collective knowledge in the Lyme disease patient and medical community, suggests the following treatment protocol in his book, Freedom from Lyme Disease. Biltricide, 4 days. Pyrantel pamoate, 17 days. Ivermectin, 17 days. Albendazole, 17 days. Alinea, 17 days. These drugs are meant to be taken sequentially, not all at the same time, and breaks should be taken as needed and the protocol tailored to individual response. Also, since ivermectin is also known to be effective against Lyme, Babesia, and Bartonella, it's important to be ready with supportive and direct treatments, as these infections may surface at the front line of the battle. If multiple courses of parasite treatment are to be given for an extended period of time, ivermectin is better tolerated and should be the drug of choice. Remember that these drugs may be less effective in those with multisystem disease, and that many Lyme patients report getting worse as a result of taking them for long periods of time. Alright, now let's take a look at alternative medicine. Herbal parasite combinations tend to include wormwood, clove, black walnut hull, garlic, and pumpkin seeds. One supplement that many have found helpful is called pyloricin, which contains oregano oil, clove oil, ginger oil, wormwood oil, which are known to not only target many types of parasites, but also Lyme and its co-infections. Herbs tend to work gradually on parasites, which can be a good thing for managing toxicity and herxing. Some other alternative protocols include diatomaceous earth, the white powder that's used to kill bedbugs. The theory is that the tiny shards contained in this earth cut the worms, causing them to dry out and die, and theoretically is supposed to be safe for humans to ingest. The Salt C protocol, which includes taking capsules of salt along with vitamin C, which also works to dehydrate the worms and gives your immune system a kick to fight them. And chlorine dioxide, a somewhat controversial treatment which, however, many Lymies have found useful. Since alternative medicine is less regulated than mainstream medicine, it's particularly important to do background research about potential dangers and side effects. And finally, let's talk about electromedicine. Those of you who watch my channel know that the main treatment I've used for Lyme disease is a Rife machine. This is a device that uses electromagnetic frequencies to literally shake microorganisms to death, causing them to break apart. As I mentioned in my video about co-infections, I truly believe that Rife machines are the best option available for Lyme disease. Among other reasons, because the Lyme bacteria are long and thin and prone to breakage, but that they may not be the best option for other infections that Lymies deal with. I've actually had quite good success using my Rife machine for parasite treatment. Perhaps because worms are also long and thin and prone to breakage? I'm not sure. But what I do know is that when I run parasite frequencies, I notice definite herxing and toxin unloading. I've also noticed that the Bob Beck device seems to work quite well for parasites. This isn't technically a Rife machine because it runs direct current electricity, so it can't be tuned to specific frequencies, and instead works on the principle of electrocuting microorganisms. Do keep in mind that if you're dealing with really big parasites like tapeworms, breaking them apart might not be a good idea. Worms can release massive amounts of heavy metal toxins into circulation. Make sure you have a detox plan in place before initiating any parasite treatment. And speaking of heavy metal issues, it's worth mentioning that if you're dealing with extreme heavy metal toxicity or mold toxicity, you may be better off avoiding parasite treatment until after you've dealt with those issues. Worms seem to utilize mold and heavy metal toxins in their biofilm to protect themselves against treatment and the human immune system. Brian Rosner shares, "Mold avoidance and detoxification allowed me to utilize many therapies on the now exposed creatures which didn't previously work. And it now became clear to me why extreme mold avoidance was so important, because even the slightest bit of mold re-exposure kept the swamp just full enough that this battle never played out and the parasites remained safely covered, invincible against any efforts to notice or eradicate them. In mold, parasite drugs helped me a little bit, but not much." I hope all the information in this video hasn't been overwhelming. One thing to keep in mind is that worm parasites are much bigger than bacteria and much, much bigger than viruses. And the bigger they are, the wider a target they make. So keep up courage and keep on fighting. Keep on fighting until it's over.